Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting place. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Really glad that you're tuning in this morning from wherever that happens to be, your backyard, your kitchen, your living room, dining room, family room, with a friend, with a significant other, a pet, hopefully a dog, not a cat. Send us a pic. I know we say this every week, but it's awesome when we get pictures in, because it just helps encourage all of us to know that we are meeting together even though we're apart. You can send them to the address on the screen, and we'll update the pre-service roll that happens actually before and after the service as you're waiting for us to go live. So make sure you do that, and thank you for sending pictures in. Now, you may have noticed some changes in scenery other than, Mark being with us this morning. We're still coming to you from our off-site facility, affectionately known as the Underground, so named because, well, we're underground in a basement in a building located up on Uplands in Rutherford. But for the last few weeks, we've had some awesome volunteers and some staff down here painting and building stuff. You can see the wall behind me. That's flooring that they put on the wall. They've done a fantastic job. We're trying to really enhance the live stream experience, both for us down here and for you guys online. So thank you to the volunteers that did that. I would name them, but there's too many to name, and I'd forget somebody, and then that wouldn't be good. But man, it looks awesome down here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So how did you do on that opening video? Because we've all heard them, right? We've heard these sayings, these phrases that sound wise and insightful, and we think we're saying them accurately, but we're actually mistaken in how we're saying it. Like we saw in the opening clip, the one that tripped me up, I don't know how you did on those, but the one that tripped me up was the mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? I've been saying that wrong for I don't know how long, my whole life, I guess, and I feel sorry for my kids because that's what I taught them to say. Here's a couple of more that you may be familiar with. Maybe you've even said them yourself. This is probably one of the most famous ones. Beam me up, Scotty, right? You ever said those words? I know I have. I utter them generally when I find myself in a situation I'd rather not be in, and it's like, just beam me up and get me out of here kind of thing. But here's the thing. James T. Kirk, captain of the USS Enterprise, the man who boldly went where no man had ever gone before, never actually said those words. What he said was, beam us up, Mr. Scott. There you go. How about this one? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Commonly referred to as Murphy's Law, right? It's attributed to a guy named Edward Murphy. He's an aerospace engineer. However, Mr. Murphy never uttered those words. What he actually said was this: if there's more than one way to do a job, and one of those ways will result in disaster, then somebody will do it that way. I know exactly what he means. Today we're looking at a famous phrase that's heard quite a bit, said quite a bit. Maybe you've said it yourself, heard it, especially if you're around church, and it's this: God will never give you more than you can bear. Some people say God will never give you more than you can handle. Good-hearted people often use this phrase, this saying, to encourage a friend, a loved one, a family member that's going through a tough time, and it makes sense. While this phrase sounds very positive and is used with the best of intentions, if you thought that it's accurate, you'd actually be mistaken. Because God won't give you more than you can handle is nowhere to be found in the Bible. It's just simply not in there, even though it sounds very biblical. What you will find, however, is a verse that sounds like it, but we often take it and we twist it around to say that. And here's the verse. It says, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to us all. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear." The word that stands out in that verse is the word temptation. Because that's what this verse is actually speaking to and addressing. Trials, troubles, tough times, they're never mentioned in this verse. But often that's when we will actually use this verse. When we see people, maybe ourselves, we're struggling. And somebody comes up to us and they tap us on the shoulder and they go, hang in there, man, hang in there. God won't give you anything more than you can handle. And like I say, it sounds really good. Those words just simply aren't true. They're just not in the Bible anywhere. What is in the Bible are stories of people like you, people like me, who were faced with far more than they could handle. Take, for example, Moses, right at the beginning of the Bible. He's the guy that led the Israelites, God's people, out of slavery from the Egyptians. And he did it by leading them through the Red Sea. It's an epic story. I'd encourage you to read it. Genesis, Exodus, read those two books. They read like a novel. And after being set free from a life of oppression, you would think people would be thankful. Like, yay, we're free. Well, here's what Moses found out. Not very long after they were set free, they did nothing but complain about everything. They were like Goldilocks. Oh, it's too hard, it's too soft, it's too hot, it's too cold. Mostly what they complained about, though, was what was on the menu. What are we going to eat? And if you're like the chief cook at home, if you prepare meals every day in and day out, maybe you can relate to this, because as you place dinner on the table and your family looks up and they go, what? Chicken again? We had chicken yesterday. Or casserole, really? Is that all you know how to make? Or how about this? No dessert? Like, we never have dessert anymore. It's pretty much what Moses was facing. And he finally gets to the point where he can't handle it anymore. And so he looks up and he says to God, he goes, I cannot carry these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. David and Goliath, of David and Goliath fame, he records these words when life was seemingly pressing in on him. He says this, for troubles surround me, too many to count. My sins pile up so high, I can't see my way out. They outnumber the hairs on my head. I've lost all courage. And we'd be remiss if we forgot a book is named after a guy that lost everything. His name's Job. Loses his family, his business, his home. And at one point, his wife looks at him and says, why don't you just dry up and die? And he can't handle it. And so he gets in a big debate with his friends and with God. It's an epic book if you want to read through it. Or these words from a guy named Paul. We talk about him a lot around here. He ended up writing what's almost half of the New Testament. He's a church persecutor at the beginning, and he turns into a church planter. And listen to these words that he wrote to some first century Christians that were planting churches, that were feeling a little discouraged, like they had too much to handle. And he says this to them. He says, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure. And listen to what he says. Far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. I don't know what goes through your mind when you hear that, but it seems to me that God does in fact allow more than we can bear, more than we can handle, which raises a very good question. And the question is this, why? Like, one thing we talk a lot about here is God's unconditional, passionate love for us. How he cares for everything, every detail of our lives. So, if that's true, if that's what God, if he is that compassionate and caring, why would he allow us to be weighed down and overwhelmed with more than we could seemingly handle or bear? Well, I think Paul gives us the answer in what he writes next. He says, indeed, we felt like we had received the sentence of death. And then he says, but this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. It's interesting to think about. Now, Paul was up against it. He was up against circumstances far bigger than he was able to handle. He was worn out. Life was pressing in on all sides. He was literally ready to throw in that towel. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And maybe as I'm reading those words, you're thinking, I can relate to that on some level. Because you're living those words right now. You have something going on in your life that just seems unbearable. I can't do this. You know, in my 25 years before I became a full-time pastor, I worked as a commercial diver up and down the coast of BC, and I logged over 6,500 hours underwater. It was an awesome job. I loved it. And if you were to ask me, you know, did you feel comfortable in the water? You must have felt really comfortable down there. At one time, I would have said, yeah, you betcha. It's like a second home. But near the end, it wouldn't have been true. You see, about 2/3 of the way through my dive career, I began having these panic attacks where I would just be suddenly overcome with the feeling that I'm going to die. I'm going to drown. And I remember the first one like it happened yesterday. We were in Haida Gwaii, Queen Charlotte Islands, diving. Been up there for a couple of weeks, working away. And so this day started like any other day. I was underwater doing my thing. When out of nowhere, I was just overwhelmed with the sense that I was going to drown. I was going to run out of air, and that was going to be it. My heart started pounding. My blood pressure went through the roof. My mouth went dry. I started sweating in my full face mask, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. And so I headed for the boat, and I went to the surface. And the second I broke the surface, I dropped all my gear, my weight belt, my tanks. I took my mask off. I stripped out of my dry suit, and I paced that deck like a caged animal. My eyes must have been this big. The crew's looking at me like, dude, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Because I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Not super concerned because I'd never had anything like this happen before. But nonetheless, it was pretty freaky. Went back diving. Never felt any panic whatsoever. But over time, that seemingly random event began to happen on a more regular basis. And it seemed like every time I went out on a trip, I would feel this panic, this angst before I went in the water or while I was underwater. And here's the thing, I told no one because I was afraid it would jeopardize my career. Doctor would find out or something like that, and they'd pull my dive ticket. And if that happened, well, that would impact my finances, which would then impact my family life, which would then impact, things just kept piling on. And so I had to figure out a way to kind of combat this thing, fight through it somehow. And so what I did is I came up with a strategy to help me cope and get through these panic attacks, which were quite nonsensical. They made no sense when they hit me. And it was a simple strategy. And here it is. It was this. Logic. I just employed logic. If I was underwater and I started to feel that panic starting to grab me, I would just stop, close my eyes, and think through everything that could possibly go wrong. I would think, I feel like I'm running out of air. So I take a deep breath. No, I've got lots of air. That's not a problem. I would look and feel where my buckles were to release my weight belt, which would then allow me to float to the surface. I would know I would look up so I could see where the boat was. If I had to run for it right away, I would know which direction to go. And it worked. That strategy worked until one day it didn't. One day my foolproof method of thinking through my checklist failed me completely and utterly. And it happened One year in Port Hardy at the north end of the island, I had just begun my dive. Same thing, I'd been up there for a couple of weeks working. Nothing at all in the panic world, just working away. I hit the bottom. I was in 60 feet of water when all of a sudden it started. And it always started in my toes for some reason. And I could feel the terror start in my toes, wrapped around my ankles, my thighs, my calves, my hips, my chest, curled around my head, and it just had me in its grip. And so I stopped. I started to employ, pulled out the weapon that had served me so well in the past, and I started to think through everything. I've got air, I've got this, I've got that. But it didn't do anything. I was absolutely convinced this was it. I was going to die. I looked to see where the boat was, and I said, okay, I can't do this anymore. If I lose my career, I lose my career. I'll just figure it out. And so I ran back for the boat, crying uncontrollably, thinking, what am I going to do? And it was so visceral. I knew I was okay, but it was so real to me. And as I recall the story, I can feel the hair on my arms going up, just as I think about that. It was such a horrible experience. I got back to the boat, I looked up, and I was just about to pull on a line that signals the deckhand that I'm coming up, and that was going to be it for me. My career was going to be over. And just before I pulled that line, a thought went through my head, and it was this: why haven't you invited God into the situation? It's something I'd never even thought of. Even though I had a relationship with God, it was like, I have never prayed about this or asked God about it or to help me through this at all. And so I thought, okay, God, you know what's going on. Help me. Just help me. I can't do this anymore. And I can't explain this, but unexpectedly and almost immediately, a calm, a peace, an assurance that I was going to be okay just enveloped me. And my breathing slowed, my heart rate and my blood pressure dropped. And incredibly, I was able to turn around and finish my dive, came up, and for the rest of my dive career, I dove for about another 3 years after that, I never suffered a panic attack. Now, again, I hope what you're not hearing in that story is, oh, get God and life is good. Because as we heard earlier, that's not the case. It's simply not true. I still have things show up in my life where it's just far too big for me to handle. But what I'm trying to do, because I still try and figure things out on my own, got this problem, I'll take care of it, and I try and work it through. But here's what I'm learning. Very slowly, but I'm learning that one day, one crisis, one trial at a time, I am learning to rely on and trust God just a little bit more than I did before. Just a little tiny step. It's all he asks us to ever take. Not a leap, not a jump. Just trust me a little bit. And that's the thing with a relationship with God. It's not a one and done process. It's a journey, a lifelong journey. And, I don't know where you stand with God, what your relationship is with him, what's happening in your life right now. Maybe for you, as you're listening this morning, the thing that you can't handle that seems to be pressing in on you is your finances. After 3 months or 4 months of lockdown, the company that you used to work for or the company that you used to own is no longer in existence, and you're on the brink of bankruptcy. And you're trying to get through it alone, and nobody knows. Maybe the x-ray or the test results came back from the doctor, and there was a shadow or a negative result. Nobody else knows, and so you try and work through the situation yourself. And on I could go. Here's the thing, whatever you're going through, don't fall for that lie that God won't give you more than you can handle. Because here's the truth. All of us at some point, whether we know God or not, whether we believe God exists or not, all of us are going to go through things that are beyond our control, beyond our ability to handle, all that stuff. It's just the way it is. The question you need to ask yourself is this: when that happens, do I want to go through it alone, or do I want to invite the God who created me, dreamt me into existence, cares about every detail of my life? Do I want him to be with me in that trial, whatever it is I'm facing? Because that's the invitation from God to us. Listen to these words from Jesus. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Those are beautiful words. And so wherever you're at today, my hope in prayer is that today would be a day, because again, this is a journey, that this would be a day that you take Jesus up on his offer and offload, invite him into whatever it is you're going through it, so you can offload that burden to him. You know, maybe for you, that's going to be the first time you've ever done anything like that. Maybe you're at the end of your rope, just like, I've got nothing else to try, I'll try it. Or maybe you've done it before. Maybe this is your 10th time, your 100th time, your 1000th time. The only thing required of us is to just let it go and just invite God into that. And we can do that a couple of different ways. We can do that by ourselves. Just pray to God, like, God help me. Or we can do it with someone else. That's why we have a prayer line, a prayer button on the chat room. You heard Ian talking about that earlier. There's a team of people on there that are willing to pray with you right now. You just have to simply click that button. Someone will invite you into a completely private, confidential chat room where you can text back and forth. They can pray for you. If you're not into the tech stuff, go to our website, click on Connect with Us, fill out the form, and you will have a team of people praying for you. And I would encourage you to take advantage of that. I really would. Friends are also a great resource to tap into when life is heavy and hard and you feel like, I just can't take this anymore. And that's why we've started these connection groups. You've heard us talking about them over the last few weeks. You know, and I've seen these in action. I've been part of it. When just after my dad died, my mom's group surrounded her, came alongside her, provided meals, just a chat, just to sit with her quietly as she grieved the loss of her husband. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And so if you're not plugged into a group, I would really, really encourage you to sign up. It's a great way to get connected and to share with one another the things that we're going through in our life. And you can do that, just go online, click on themeetingplace.org, and you'll see a little button that says Connection Groups. Click on that, tell you everything you want to know, how to sign up, how to start a group, whatever you want to do. So I would encourage you to do that. The invitation, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, is for every single one of us. And my prayer is that you would take that invitation and ask God into whatever it is you're facing. I invite you to pray with me. God, we can, the truth is life can just be hard. I mean, we'll have seasons where things are great and we'll just be humming along, but then we have a friend or maybe even ourselves, we just hit that bump in the road. And it just seems like things are coming at us so fast and we just feel like we're so overwhelmed. And we try and comfort ourselves or our friends by saying, don't worry, God won't give you more than you can handle. And it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of, hey, you're part of a broken world. It's not running the way it should. But when things go sideways, I will be there with you in it. And I just pray that wherever we find ourselves this morning, we would just be reminded of that. It's just a demonstration of how much you love us. So thank you for everyone that's tuning in here this morning. Just be with them as we go through these strange times we find ourselves in. And I pray this in your name. Amen.